spoke last week. I see
I got-
evidence here,
Yeah.
and you did pretty well. Oh, look at
And
that.
she even typed hers, yeah.
Well, okay.
Oh, I find it easy. I just kind of spew when it comes to the computer. And I found 10 minutes wasn't enough time.
Yeah, that's what she said last week.
And that's
yeah.
generally what
Yeah.
will happen, but some people get kind of, they don't know where to start or what to say or how long or what to do. The main thing is write down what it is you want to say. Don't think about grammar, punctuation, spelling, any of that. At least get it down, and then like you did, if you want to quote unquote edit it and make it look neater later, you can do that.
Right.
But the main thing is to get it down, okay? So, and you both did that. You both did that, and you found out it takes longer
Yeah.
when you get started on
Keep
something.
going.
And that's wonderful, because like I said at the beginning, if you start writing on one subject and then another one pops up, so you make a little note that says, I'll do that later. You finish your first subject, then you start with that next subject. You'll find, as I have oftentimes, it's been hours since I looked up from my piece of paper, and I've done 3 different stories, so that's fantastic. Okay. Like I said, you can start anywhere with your life story. So we're going to talk about something that most people don't consider writing about. And that is, was there a major disappointment in your life that actually turned out later to be an asset? This is a good subject for you to write on. So if you want to make a note, consider writing about that after you leave here. Was there a major disappointment that turned out to be an asset? Let me give you an example. For 18 years, I had a career with the airline industry, and then suddenly they filed bankruptcy, and I lost not only my job, but my pension. So I was forced to start over. And my husband was in not great health, so he quit his job, and we decided to sell everything we owned and get in our motorhome and travel to find a better spot to relocate and start over. We were living in Denver at the time, and we'd both grown a little bored with the big city.
You were living where?
In Denver,
Oh, Denver.
yes. So we decided we'd take a year and do this. As it turned out, we met fabulous people along the way, and we started doing seasonal work, which means we would go to an area and we'd work a seasonal job, maybe 3 months, 6 months, maybe 9 months. And I ended up, this ended up being a 10-year career that we did this. I ended up finding that the people that I was traveling with were so fascinating. And I listened to their life stories, and I kept thinking, you guys gotta write that down, you gotta write that down. That's where this class came about. And then the book eventually came about from that. So it's just that every single person has a story to write about. Even if you're talking about doing a story that you're working on with a family member, like going to grandma's house or doing something as young children, even as adults, you are both going to take away from that event different perspectives, because you're both going to go in with different ideas, what it means to you. So always remember to write from your perspective. We don't ever do woulda, coulda, shoulda, no finger pointing, unless maybe it's at yourself and it's because you made a mistake and you learned something from it. But basically you just want to lay down the facts about what happened to you during this particular event, okay? Sometimes when you get started on this, you become stuck. Maybe you're all gung-ho and you're going along, and then the next day you look at this piece of paper and you go, what am I gonna do? I'm tired of this subject, but I don't know where to go or what to do next. sometimes you can take an event or a person and do this little exercise called rippling. And what it is, we're going to use mom as an example here. And forgive my writing, and try to do this without being in the way. Okay, we've decided we're going to write something about mom. Okay, so what do we remember about mom? Brown hair. You're not going to be able to read this, I'm sure. Blue eyes. There we go. Baker, wonderful baker. Loved to sew. Artistic. All of these things, you can just build on that. It can be any event. You can put down the event, who was there, what, where, how. And you will gather information from these little words and use those to form your story. Sometimes that's helpful to people, because when you get stuck, it's no fun having writer's block when you really want to get something done.
What's that called again?
It's called rippling.
Rippling.
These are supposed to be like, these little ideas ripple out
Okay,
from the main topic.
thank you.
Yes. And you can get as descriptive with that as you want, but from that, there's already a story for me,
Mm-hmm.
I know she made my sister's wedding dress. She made my friend's wedding dress. She did all of these wonderful things. So now I know what direction I want my story to start, or where I want it to go. So that's just one exercise to help you if you think you get stuck. If you still have an issue and you're not real sure what to do, one of the best things to do is to go to your family albums.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you haven't done this already, and you have a sibling, have a parent that's still left, sit down with them, go through the family pictures, and on the back, in the special photo pencil or pen, you write the complete name of the person. Don't write grandma and grandpa. You might write Walter and Rose Smith. If you know where the picture was taken, write down the name. If you know what event it was taken at, write that down.
And if you know her maiden name, put that in.
And if you
Yeah.
know the maiden name, that
Yeah,
is
that would be
very,
helpful.
very important,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing research on genealogy. You can go back genealogy. I have family that goes back to the 800s in England. And it's Sir John Smith, wife Mrs. Smith. For centuries, they never gave the wife's name. They didn't give any information other than there was a wife. That was it. When they started doing census in the US, they would list head of household, the man, and then spouse, the woman. They never mentioned, hardly ever mentioned her maiden name. And then your siblings, the sons and daughters, whatever. But sometimes they didn't even list the woman at all. They would say married, but they never listed the woman at all. So you're very right. Maiden names are important, especially if the woman was married, or the man, generally it's the man that's married one or two more times. And you will find when you do genealogy that you'll list one spouse and you'll list another spouse with children, another spouse with children. But you gotta know exactly where to start. And if you don't have a maiden name, it's really difficult because we have a branch of our family tree, and like Grandpa was named Michael John Smith. His father's name was John Michael Smith. His father's name was John Smith. It's like they had zero originality as far as trying to figure out which
Yeah.
John.
Yeah.
If you don't know their birth date, you can get really lost because you can only name a child so many times after the great-grandfather, So if you take your family photo album and just pull out one picture. This happens to be my grandparents on my mother's side on their wedding day. And you start telling a story about them. I know that my grandmother really wasn't excited about getting married. She was a school teacher and she was enjoying that. But apparently Grandpa was persuasive because he brought her to Colorado and they homesteaded. And then she had 10 children. And then after she raised her 10 children, she opened a restaurant.
Wow.
I mean, she was sturdy stock, I tell you what. And if you can get these really unique family stories woven into your family history, they are part of your history. I have a great-grandfather, they told me that when he would come to visit, he always expected that there would be milk and a particular cake for him. That's the only reason I think that they said he came. But Grandma was a great cook, and she always had his milk and his cake for him. So, but if you can, please go through your photo albums and be very specific on who is in them. Full names, dates, locations, if you possibly can. Okay? The other thing that you can do when you're writing your life story, if you want to, since most of us have lived through a considerable length of time, I'm speaking for myself, you can look at your place in history. And they have this program, I think it's called A Look at the World When You Were Born, and this happened to be my mother. It told who the president was, what the population of the United States was in 1927, 119 million. The cost of a first-class stamp was 2 cents. And during her time, her birth year, is when the first Talkie, the jazz singer, came out. And I know my mother never saw a movie until probably she was close to being married, because that just wasn't in the cards. Anyway, you know when World War II was, you know when Pearl Harbor was, you know what you were doing when the Twin Towers went down. If you have a particular story that relates directly or indirectly through a family member through one of those events, you may want to include some history also in your story. These are just branches I'm giving you on where to go on all the different ways that you can write your story. Okay. In the beginning, you can start with when you were a child, or you can start any event. But I think the one of the nicest things I have found is if I ask my students to write down their earliest childhood memory. What is your earliest childhood memory? And don't think on it too long. Anytime that you come up with a suggestion or a question, what the first thing that comes into your mind is what you want to write about. And sometimes you'll have a fleeting first thing and then, but if you can think about the very earliest memory that you have and write that down, because that will tell you where you were, how old you were. Mine was at 4, I know that. And I can remember distinctly the trailer that we were living in and the beautiful wood mahogany walls and ceiling, and how cozy and tiny it was for 5 of us. But,
That's a good way to look at it. I like that.
yeah. Well,
I mean, really,
it truly was. My father
Wow.
had just come out of World War II. He had survived the European conflict and married my mother. And in the first 3 years, they had 3 children. And he went to school on the VA benefit to learn to be a mechanic, but he actually ended up turning out to be a carpenter instead. But we lived in a 21-foot trailer. And so there was, my brother and I slept in on the couch. My baby sister slept in the top dresser drawer in the bedroom. And it probably wasn't, basically as long as this table situation here. It wasn't much longer than that. But we lived in it for probably, I was maybe 7 or 8 before we could move into the house. But my parents, this is another thing, if you're a little bit older, in the olden days, you didn't just go out and build a house. If you didn't inherit a house, sometimes you could buy a house or a part of a house, or a one-room schoolhouse, which is what my grandfather did, and haul it into town and put it on a lot and build onto it. Or my parents bought a old home, really old home, in a town 65 miles away, and my father and my grandfather and my mother moved it 65 miles to a lot in town. And then as Dad could, he put in plumbing, he built a kitchen and a real bathroom, and that's why we're living in the trailer next door to the house that they were working on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it's how did you get to where you were? How did your parents come to be where they were when you were born? I happened to be born in Fort Lupton because my father was working at the sugar factory there. But, so, and I think I was 9 months old when we left there. I wasn't very old. But, so if you can go through a little bit by little bit, your childhood, growing up, all of that. And then one of the other milestones in your life you might want to write about is becoming an adult. I think it was on my 12th, maybe 13th birthday, and I was enjoying my little party, and then an adult, I'm not sure who, came up to me and said, "How does it feel to be an adult now?" And I went, my world was crushed. I'd seen adults. I'd seen how hard they worked. I was not anxious to be one of those guys.
No.
And I think just that suggestion, the power of that suggestion, made me stop and become an adult and become, okay, maybe I can't go roughhousing out with the field and with the boys anymore. Maybe I can't sit on Dad's chair anymore in the evening. Maybe I shouldn't do that because I'm an adult. The power of your words or the power of words spoken to you can change you enormously without the person who spoke the words even realizing it. My parents did realize that I made a shift because they were discussing it that evening. And I did. I was always kind of an obedient child, so I guess I decided I had to grow up. Bummer.
It is a bummer. It still hasn't happened yet.
That was a bummer. Yeah. So at 19, I revolted and I became a child again. But that's okay. The other thing is that I remember one time I did something bad. I was bad. And my mother, I thought, oh man, I'm going to get a spanking, I'm going to get punished. Well, I didn't. She said, I am disappointed in you.
That's even worse.
Oh my gosh. I said, oh my God, just beat me to death.
Yeah.
Oh Mom, don't say that. I'm so sorry. That was so terrible for me, But if something like that happened to you, is there a particular person in your life, a mentor, a family member, that had such influence that what they said and did really influenced you and affected you on what you wanted to become, maybe how you acted, what you did or didn't do? These are important people to include in your story. I had an aunt, I had 2 aunts. One from my father, one from my mother, both named Loretta. But the one on my father's side lived in Los Angeles, and I thought that was quite romantic, being from northeastern Colorado in the middle of nowhere. And she always came to visit, and she always had a camera. This was back in the days where taking a picture meant get out the light meter, everybody pose, say cheese for 900 minutes, it seemed like.
Yeah.
When you're a kid and you're sitting on a rock or someplace in the forest and she wants to take a picture. But the one thing that she did for us was that she made a memory for us that was visible. We couldn't afford a camera, but she had a nice camera. And in those days, they did slides. So she would send us copies of slides. And years later, when she was still alive, fortunately, I ran across a box of those. And I called her and said, I can't tell you how much these mean to me. This is when my brother and my sister and I were maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that, before my little brother came along. We would never have recorded those years if it hadn't been for my aunt. You know, it just wouldn't have happened. So she was influential in my life. Plus, I thought that she was always dressed very nicely. She did lots of traveling. I thought she was super rich. I'm sure she wasn't. But to me, she was very rich. And so she was kind of a role model for me. You will find that throughout your life, you will probably have mentors, role models. Having gone through and written a lot of my life, I find that at each major intersection of my life, number of years or something, there is always somebody there that is playing a really important part in determining what's going on with me and how I'm thinking at that particular time. The other thing we don't often think about writing about is our best friends. If you have had pets or several pets throughout your life, there may be 1, 2, or 3 special pets. Write about them. How did they come into existence? Our dog just happened to adopt us. He was just kind of a stray and wandered in and decided to stay. So we had him for, I think, 20 years. If you have a special pet that was given to you, or if you rescued a special pet. I never had another pet in my life until about 18 years ago, when another stray wandered in and determined that he was going to live with me. And that was my tomcat, and he just passed away last year, so he was about 19 years old when he did that. And there's a whole story about him, but I'm not going to tell you because it makes me cry. But all I can tell you is that he chose me, I didn't choose him. He was determined to stick around. Okay. Another thing when you're growing up, sometimes people inadvertently give you labels. You know, you're introduced. This is Jean, she's the smart one. This is our boy, and this is our darling little girl. My sister looked like Shirley Temple, so there was no competing with her. But they didn't realize that they didn't mean anything by it. They just didn't realize at the time that you're listening to that. And so you kind of, maybe it was just me, I was sensitive to that. But I liked learning. My mother wasn't able to complete high school, so she made sure that I knew my ABCs, I could write my name and all of that before I went to school. And then when I got to school and I did this stuff and they put stickers on it and you got A's, and wow, that was really cool to me. So was there a label you gave yourself? Those are usually the labels that matter, is how did you feel about yourself? And think about yourself as you were a young child. How about the awkward teenage years? How about when you became a quote-unquote adult and went out on your own? And are there labels that you think you still carry, or that you think people see you in one aspect, but you don't see yourself that way? I recently had a heart-to-heart talk with a friend, and she told me some things about myself that I didn't realize I was giving that impression. It was nothing bad, it was just that I didn't realize I was giving that particular impression. So it's interesting to see how labels do affect you. And if you have a label that you're living with that you don't like, get rid of it. You're the only one that can. You truly are. You can change that perspective. The other thing about writing, and we're covering a lot of territory in a short period of time here, and I'll give you an exercise in a little bit. Well, how about I do it now? Since we're all ladies, turn to a blank page. And no matter how you grew up, it didn't matter, dirt poor, rich, whatever. Fashion, there was always a style, there was always, clothing was important. Always, always. My mother was from the Depression. Their dresses were made out of flour sacks. You know, so every girl in school had the same rosebud dress because that's what the flower came in, you know. Do you remember what your quote-unquote style was? What you liked as a child? What type of a person were you? Were you the tomboy? Were you the one who always dressed nicely? My mother taught us, we were in 4-H, so we learned to sew by the time we were 9. But before that, my mother was an excellent seamstress, and anytime we would go to school and the rich kids had on something that we thought we would like to have, I'd go home and say, Mom, can you make us a squaw dress? Remember squaw dresses, everybody? Circle skirts,
Oh, yeah.
you know, yards and yards and yards of fabric. Whatever it was, we'd go home and we'd ask Mom, and at that time, Woolworths had this wonderful little fabric section, and you could buy 3 yards of material for $1. And you could make a dress, a skirt, a blouse, whatever. So just take a couple minutes and write about maybe the style that you remember, the style that you like, what type of a quote unquote, how did you feel about style? I mean, some people just, it didn't really make any difference. If I was gonna go out and roam around the fields and play with the boys, I was wearing jeans, I dressed just like they did. But then on Sunday, to go to church, you had to have your Sunday outfit,
Oh, yeah.
you know, along with your Sunday dinner, right? So just take a few minutes and talk and think about yourself as it's featured style-wise. And did you make your own clothes? How many of you made your own clothes? Yeah, okay. A lot of us did. When I got married, I was 19, and my husband informed me that we could now afford real clothes. I said, okay. Yeah. So I didn't do much sewing after that. Okay. This will get you started, so finish it when you get home. And since we're talking about clothes, does everybody remember clotheslines?
Oh, yes.
Everybody had a clothesline, whether you lived in the city or in the country. But there were basic rules for the clothesline. You had to hang the socks by the toes, not the top. You hung pants by the bottom cuffs, not the waistbands. You had to wash the clothesline before hanging any clothes. You walked the entire length of each line with a damp cloth around the lines. That was for a very good reason. We lived in the country where the wind blew all the time and that clothesline was dirty. So you didn't want to hang your clothes on it. You always hung whites with whites and hung them first. You usually washed the whites first, so first out, first in. The reason being, if you were like us, you only had one washing machine fill up and you did whites, colors, darks. That was it. We had no water. Water was hauled to us 500 gallons every 2 weeks for a family of 6. We were very skimpy on water because it didn't exist where we lived. It was dry land farming out there.
Wow.
If you could afford to have a well, you were very, very lucky. We couldn't afford that. You would do your wash on Monday. Never hang clothes out on the
Always
weekend,
Monday.
especially on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't matter if it was sub-zero weather, clothes would freeze dry, and they sure did. It wasn't until my younger brother, who's 12 years younger than I am, was born in January of 1959 that my mother said, there will be a clothes dryer. She said, I am not hanging cotton diapers out in January. So she got her clothes dryer. You would hang the sheets and the towels on the outside lines so you could hide the unmentionables in the middle.
Item, yeah.
Yeah, hide them, great. If you were efficient, you would line the clothes up so that each item did not need 2 clothespins, but shared one of the clothespins with the next washed items.
Right. Remember that.
Clothes came off the line before dinner time, neatly folded in the clothes basket and ready to be ironed.
Oh, God.
What was that
That's a lot of
wonderful
work.
little, do you remember the Coke bottle with the little thing on
With
the
the
top?
sprayer type thing.
Well, it was
Or
a
the-
little shaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how you, because the clothes were out, they were dry, and in order for them to be ironed, especially cottons, you had to dampen them, so you had to have the shaker and dampen them down.
They were dampened and put in the refrigerator.
Oh, we
Oh,
never
yeah.
did that.
Well, we didn't have a refrigerator.
Yeah. We didn't do that.
We didn't have one like they have today, but
That's
we had,
true.
it was a little, yeah, well, no, it was,
You
it
know
was
the
a
flat irons?
refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, flat irons. Yeah.
I grew up using those
Oh,
until
my
I got
goodness.
to a certain age. Yeah.
Wow.
Flat irons, you had 2, one heating up on the stove and the other one you used.
Yeah.
And it got cold fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
didn't iron things like sheets at that time.
No.
You
Oh, my
ironed
mother
them.
did.
Oh.
That's,
really?
that's how I learned how to iron.
Oh.
On sheets and pillowcases, because they
Oh.
were flat. And you
Yeah.
didn't have to turn them or put
Yeah.
sleeves or collars.
No, we just did the necessities, the shirts and the skirts and the dresses. Jeans didn't get ironed, sheets and pillowcases didn't get ironed because they went immediately back onto the bed. So it didn't matter.
And then we used the iron as a doorstop.
There you go, that's right. I had one of the,
I still have one as a doorstop.
okay. And a clothesline was a news forecast to neighbors passing by. There were no secrets you could keep when clothes were hung to dry. It also was a friendly link, for neighbors always knew if company had stopped on by to spend a night or 2. Or then you'd see the fancy sheets and towels upon the line. You'd see the company tablecloth with intricate designs. The line announced a baby's birth from folks who lived inside, as brand new infant clothes were hung so carefully with pride. The ages of the children could so readily be known by watching how the sizes changed. You'd known how much they've grown. It also told when illness struck as extra sheets were hung, then night clothes and a bathrobe too haphazardly were slung. It also said on vacation now when lines hung limp and bare. It told we're back when clotheslines sagged with not an inch to spare. New folks in town were scorned upon if wash was dingy and gray, as neighbors carefully raised their brows and looked the other way. But clotheslines now are of the past, for dryers make work much less. Now what goes on inside the home is anybody's guess. I really miss that way of life. It was a friendly sign when neighbors knew each other best by what hung out on the line.
That's a neat poem, yeah.
That was
Very neat.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Poetry is also a fascinating way to write your life story. If you are so inclined to be a poet, sometimes it's easier to just write a short poem about an event than to actually draw it out and write lengthy words. If you're not a poet, that's okay. I never wrote a single bit of poetry until my father passed away. And for some reason that evening after his service, I went out and sat in his chair in the yard to watch the sunset. And this poem just came to me. It just did. Maybe I have it and I can share it with you here. Let's see. But this was definitely the first time I ever wrote a poem. And we'll see if I can find it here. I think I put it in here, but I'm not sure.
Was your dad a poet?
No.
I just wonder where the inspiration came from. You know?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I was just sitting there thinking about him, and no one in my family, as far as I knew, ever wrote poetry. I never really read poetry except maybe in school. But
Interesting.
here's what it was. Things will be different now. No more keeping the shades tightly closed. No house warm to 80 degrees year-round. No family or friends reluctant to call for fear of hearing, keep the door closed. No napkins under the drink glasses. No open kitchen cabinet doors. No painful moans of, oh God, let me die, because now you are gone. No more memories to make of wading in ice-cold mountain streams, of a dedicated cheering section at basketball games, of a kind and tender heart to each family dog, of a cheerful voice to Devonshire residents. That was a nursing home. Of a conspiratorial wink and tell all stories, of a firm hand sharing construction knowledge, of an energetic dancer swinging mom across the floor, of a competitive card player full of jokes. Hard work was never shirked, as you often had 2 or more jobs at a time. Education and love of country instilled lovingly in your children. Fair treatment given, if not always received. These were your credo. Things will be different now. Empty because you are gone. Better because you were here.
You can hardly read that without
I
crying.
know,
Yeah, she was getting,
I
yeah,
almost started crying.
yeah, she was getting a little,
And that's been almost
Yeah.
20 years.
yeah, oh yeah.
You know?
That kind of thing, it hits you no matter how old you are, right?
Yes.
And it's only because I never changed anything. That's just, I went in the house, grabbed a piece of paper and wrote it down, and that's how it was.
Mm.
So that was me trying to say, thank you, Dad, for all that you did do, although he had a terrible, he had degenerative arthritis and had a leg amputated and was in a lot of pain for a number of years.
Mm.
So, but lots and lots of wonderful, pleasant memories. He was a great guy. Okay, so if poetry, you can try it. If you don't want to, that's okay. Another suggestion, I don't mean to confuse you all, but I'm just trying to give you a lot of different options here. And as soon as I can think of this, okay. This was something that I hadn't done before, and I was researching some information, and I decided, I wonder how this would work. And I put it up here, 10 years in 3 words. Okay, what that means is that you try, it's not exactly poetry, but you're trying to condense a thought into 3 words. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples. I don't expect you to do this on your own. So I picked 10 years. I picked 1983 to 1993, just to write about. You can pick any timeline that you want. Loss of a job. Continental Airlines gone. Angry, hurt, confused. No longer belonging. Dean's health suffering. Must start over. New location, jobs, less stress and fear. Downsize home, stuck. Reduce to an RV. Tow a car and locate seasonal jobs. Okay? So that explains what we did in about a 2-year period. That kind of explains what happened. So if you can think back to a period of time and you're going to say, make it happy. Mine just happened to not start out great. It ends up okay. But describe anything. Maybe the birth of your first child. Maybe your wedding. Maybe something else really great. And think about the experience and then try to see if you can do that. It's just an exercise to try to get you to really look at your life and to kind of condense it down. What is the most expressive way that you can express it? That repeating in yourself, Jean. You can use this as a basis for writing the entire story if you want to. Because I did the same thing, yes.
When it's like 3 words, so each year has 3 words?
No. You're just writing, each line is 3 words.
Each thought.
Each thought is condensed into 3 words. So the first line said loss of job.
Okay,
I lost my
Gotcha.
job due to a bankruptcy, but all I did is say
Okay.
loss of job.
thank you.
The second explains where it was, who it was with.
Okay.
Okay. And then my feeling, I felt like I no longer belonged. I was hurt. I was angry. So those are expressing how I felt. And then the action plan, what did we plan to do? Starting over. And then how did we do that? Downsized, sold everything.
Perfect, thank you.
So this is just a suggestion, but I found it to be very interesting. So I wrote my 10 years and I condensed it to a page and a half,
Wow, okay.
You could also use that as to write about.
Absolutely.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would
You can-
remind you of.
Yes,
something.
you can use, and you don't have to do the whole 10 years. I mean, you can do just on a particular event or something. You can just do that way, say, I really want to get the essence of what it was. I want to write it down. So you'll want to do the highlights. Say, I don't want to forget Uncle John's pony, or, whatever the key ingredients are. It's just a good writing exercise to see if you can do it. If you don't like it, forget I said it.
I love it. I like it. It gives you some kind of because you get to writing about it, the next thing you know, you feel like you're going everywhere. So it gives you kind of an outline, a parameter.
Right, and it will help you, because like I said, I did the 10 years in a page and a half, and all I did was just sit and think about what were the steps that we took. After this happened, what did we do? Where did we go? let's see, on the road to summer jobs, Yellowstone Activities Director. So that tells, you know, what one experience was in basically 3 sentences there. So I know now I can expand on that one particular thing, and I can expand what that entire summer was like. But I've got the essence of it right there, okay? And again, it's all in what you think you would like to do. There's no wrong way, because this is your story. You know, the main thing you want to do is to be true to yourself. Make sure that you write as you talk and let your personality shine through. I told these ladies last week about a story that I had a gentleman who wrote his life story, but his family told him it wasn't very good. And after I read it, I said, your story is excellent. He was a jazz musician who couldn't make a living in America, so moved to Paris. He became somebody very established over there and worked with a lot of the greats that we now know as the beginning in the jazz industry. So because of his unique occupation, he spoke a different language in a lot of ways. He had certain idioms. He did talk certain ways. If they would have taken that out of his story, it would have just been a series of facts. So you're not writing down just facts. You want to put your personality in there. If you're a prankster, if you're a serious person, if you're whatever your personality is, let it shine through. If ain't is one of your favorite words, use it. Again, just write it.
What's my favorite word?
Ain't.
Ain't.
Ain't. A-I-N-T.
Oh,
Ain't.
I'm not
I
from
ain't
Colorado.
right.
Every once in a while I don't get it.
Oh, yeah.
I used that a long time.
That used to be a really no-no in the beginning, and now it's just
Yeah,
accepted. It's accepted, yeah. Make sure that you are telling the truth from your perspective again. And try to use some emotion in some of your stories. If you're writing about a certain event that really was emotional for you, that really brought, you know, is bringing back things like me about to cry over my poem from my dad, well, it's because those words are very important to me, and they evoke emotions. I'm assuming that you got some emotion out of them. So if something's really powerful to you, write it the way that it's affecting you. And you, like I say, you can go back and forth in time, because you might be sitting here today thinking, oh, you know, I remember something that happened at camp when I was 10. I gotta remember to write that down. That's when you make yourself a little note and put it in the margin or something. Okay. Does anybody have a quick question while I'm looking for the next page? Okay.
I do have a question.
Sure.
How did you start on this journey?
On writing the lifestyle, basically when I was RVing, I met all of these wonderful people, and we would sit around the campfire at night and tell stories. And one lady said to me, I was telling a story about how great my husband and I were at getting lost, because we did it regularly. She said, lost.
Getting lost on your traveling.
Yeah, which is no fun when you have a motorhome towing a car. And I can tell you, back east, some of those roads don't go anywhere. They don't go anywhere. I tell you, we made they have town squares, you know, a lot of these little New England towns. We were looking for the road to lead us back to the interstate. We must have gone round and round. I don't see anything but driveways. There's no road. How are we gonna get out of here? Where are we supposed to go?
Yeah.
Finally, we stopped at an inn, and I went in and I asked them for directions. And they're going, well, you go, dip, 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 dip. And I went, and I was like panicked. And she said, you know what? It's slow. Let me show you. She took me through what I would have considered an alley, down this tunnel, around through the trees, and up. I have no idea how we got there, but we finally found the interstate.
Wow.
Otherwise, we'd have been camped there for days.
That happens in the south too.
Oh, yes, yes, there are.
Oh, it's just around the corner. Yeah, sure. It's not- You can't miss it. Yeah, yeah,
That's
you
right,
can't miss
that's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Well, as I was telling her some of these experiences, she was a published author. She said, why don't you write your story and submit it to one of the magazines, which I ended up doing and getting published and wrote for them for a while. But I really wanted to have these other people's stories recorded. I wanted them to record their stories. So I found a class one time that was doing writing your life story. It was a one-time thing. And after the class, I said, we gotta keep doing this. I ended up working in California, and I presented a proposal to the senior center. Can I teach a class on my lunch hour, because I was working at City Hall across the street, on my lunch hour to your seniors and have them come in and write their life story? They said, sure. So I did that for several months. And that's how I got started with this. And then when I moved here, I started teaching at senior college.
I love that.
Yes, I started teaching at senior college, and that's why after my classes there for several years, there were so many people who said, we only see you once a year, so write us a book. So I wrote the booklet, and then I started teaching at different libraries, Penrose and Florence. So I've taught off and on, and in between that I teach classes. I'm a certified herbalist, so I teach classes on herbs and medicinal herbs and gardening, and a few other things. So
Wow.
that's how I got started. But this is
I
one of
got a
my
lot of catching up to do.
this is my great love, because I think everybody has a fascinating story. And I was just blown away at some of the people I was traveling with, what they had done in their careers. And every time they would say, nobody cares. I'm nothing special. You have to remember, if you have children, grandchildren especially, they only know you as who you are now. They know nothing about your childhood, who you were, what your dreams were. They don't know anything about your teenage years, how you met your husband probably, what your ambitions were. I mean, and if you try to tell them right now, they're not going to be interested.
No.
But if you write it down, I will tell you that I worked at hospice for a number of years, and part of my job one time was to interview some of the patients and record their stories for their family. I interviewed a co-worker, co-volunteer, who was 99 and a half. You've already heard this story. But this gentleman could remember everything about his life. He told me from the time he was 8 years old who he worked for, where he lived, what he did. He was fabulous, and we were so looking forward to celebrating his 100th birthday. But he never quite made it. But we did still have a party on his birthday and invited his family down. And I had already given them the tapes. And they said that was the best gift they had, because they had his voice, they had stories they didn't know anything about. And so I also suggest, if you can, to make a voice recording and dedicate it to your children. And I didn't bring it with me, but there is a wonderful little tape recorder that you can purchase. I got mine at Best Buy. It's a Philips, or you can buy a Sony. And it has the feature where you can record into it hundreds of hours. Then you can hook it up to your computer, and it will print what you recorded. So
So if you're looking for something like that, you just ask for a Sony recorder to
a voice recorder. A voice recorder with, I think they just call it voice recognition. that you can hook to your computer that will download the words. It's like we dictate into our phones. You're dictating into this, and then you can plug it into the computer, and it will print it for you. Mine's brand new, and I haven't used it yet. I have an old one that I used with my family, and I have hundreds of hours of tapes from my family. You know, I was famous for sneaking into the family reunions and setting it down and walking away.
Do you know of a place where I could take a VHS, is it VHS, the old,
Mm-hmm.
and transfer it to,
CDs?
yeah,
There is a gentleman who does that, and I don't exactly know where, but I would check with the Golden Age Center and see, because he used to advertise that he would do that. He would take tapes and,
because I not only have a slides, but I have all the voices of my family on it.
Wow.
well, and if you, are you still able to play them? Do you have something to play them on?
Not now.
Oh, okay,
No, not now.
okay. Yep,
It's that, I don't know if you get that magazine free in
the shopper?
You know, great quality connections.
Oh,
There's an ad in there because I ripped it out in case I ever need it.
oh, okay, that's the one that comes out of Pueblo?
VHS onto
Yeah, VHS onto,
DVD, I
yeah.
think they put,
Yeah.
I think he puts it on DVD.
DVD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
There's people that do that.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, good. Well,
and you
maybe
might
my-
be able to check on, I know what you're talking about. If I see one, I'll let you know.
Yeah,
If I see
Because
it.
my family would be
Yes.
thrilled to
Yeah.
get something like that,
Yeah.
you know.
The only other option is if you had a way to play them, you could actually record them on your new tape recorder that would plug it into the computer.
Oh, the one, the Philips that you told us about?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I could buy one of those machines, you know, I mean, then,
maybe,
yeah, I might be able to get one.
yeah.
Mine broke though.
Well, they're kind of, they're kind of tough to get the old fashioned
Yeah,
stuff anymore.
yeah.
But Best Buy is probably going to
Okay.
have something, or they might know
Yeah.
somebody who would. But yes,
I know they definitely do that, because we had a lot of ours from my dad's
Transferred
era.
over, yeah.
Transferred over,
Yeah.
yeah, and from when we were growing up and everything, but we lived in Denver, and there was quite a few places there that did it.
they
Yeah.
used to do that a lot,
Yeah.
quite a bit. But now they're
The
used to.
Golden Age, though, Center is a good,
I think
idea.
I think the gentleman might be associated with them. I'm not sure. I
The
haven't
one who runs, Golden Age?
Well, just ask whoever's at the desk if they know somebody, or if they have, sometimes they have one of those business cards
Yes,
from those people, and
Yeah.
I know I've
Right.
seen it advertised someplace, and I don't remember where. You might start looking in the shopper too,
Yeah.
because sometimes they
Right.
have it advertised in there.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's tough. I have an old-fashioned tape recorder, so I can still listen to some of my cassette tapes. But how long is that gonna be good? I
oh,
don't
yeah,
know.
right,
You
yeah.
know,
All
so-
this new stuff, you know, they just let everything else go.
Well,
It's kind of
that's
sad,
that's the reason I like that tape recorder, is because if you can get it into your computer, then you can print it, or you can, save it onto a CD yourself.
Right, right,
And
yeah,
then that should be around for a while.
yeah,
you
right.
know. So,
At least before I die, kick the bucket.
yeah. Well, and that's one thing that when we are compiling all of this good information, and we've done all of this research, like I have a whole table full of genealogy stuff at my home right now that I'm trying to do for my siblings, because I don't have children. I have 2 brothers. And whether or not they're going to appreciate that when I'm gone, I have no idea, but I'm putting it together, and it's theirs to do with what they want to, when that time comes. So, all right. Another thing that, I was saying, that when you're writing, write in the way that you speak, write with the vocabulary of the season or of the year. Remember all the words from when we were teenagers that don't exist anymore?
groovy.
Yeah, groovy. There you go.
Yeah, right.
There are so many things that because you are writing for the future. You have to remember when you're writing your life story down and you expect to leave it to your family and hopefully they're going to pass it on and maybe a great grandchild who's never even been born is going to read it. So you want to be very specific about who you were and when you were and what your times were. And you can talk about things that they will roll their eyes and go, I have no idea what they're talking about. Do you remember when moms were always at home when kids got home from school? Yep. Do you remember when your mother wore nylons that came in 2 pieces?
Yes.
Garter belts?
Garter belts,
Torture belts? Yeah.
Yeah, torture.
Nylons, they're torture.
Nylon, yeah, nylons. Well, when I started working in Denver in 1967, you were not permitted, I wasn't permitted to wear a pair of slacks or a dress, slack suit to work until I think it was 1970. And I worked in an office and nobody ever saw me. You know, nobody from the outside ever saw me. The only one saw me. I was sent home one day because I wore a culotte dress. And my supervisor
very
said, that's pants. I said, it's not, it's a skirt.
It's a skirt.
I was sent home.
It's come a long ways from
And
that.
look
It's-
what they wear today.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes.
A variety of things.
Yeah. Well, remember drive-in movies?
Oh, I
I
miss
mean,
those.
That's not, you know,
Yeah.
we used to go to the roller rink. That used to
Yes.
be a big thing. That was a big dating thing. Used to have Tinker Toys and Erector sets. I remember as a child, we didn't have very many toys, but my brother got a road grader one time, which meant that we could go out in the yard and he would grade these little roads and we could build sticks and fences and, you know, all this little stuff. So we played for hours in the dirt with that little road grader. That was a big deal for us. When I started work in Denver in 1967, gas was 35 cents a gallon. And I do remember 15-cent McDonald's hamburgers.
Wow.
I'm old.
No, that wasn't really, that was in the 60s.
That was in the,
Wait, McDonald's didn't even get started until the late 60s, did they?
I don't remember exactly what
I think it
yeah.
was, yeah.
But when I was in high school, yeah, the first McDonald's was like in Westminster someplace. What used to still be there. But when I was in high school, we could go into Sterling, which is in northeastern Colorado, and they had the Busy Bee drive-in, and you could get 5 hamburgers for $1.
Wow.
And if mom and dad took us to town on Saturday, so that dad could get his check cashed, we could buy groceries and do whatever. If we had money left over, we could take the family to dinner for $1. Because at that time, there was only 5 of us. So we
White Castles were a nickel.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
White Castle.
they were Becky's was the equivalent,
Uh-huh.
was White Castles, yeah.
Yeah, White
We didn't
Castle, I
have one of
remember
those in
that.
my town either, but I remember hearing about them.
And
Yeah.
remember when they had full-service gas stations? My grandmother
Oh,
owned
yeah,
one.
that was nice.
You got your windows washed, your oil
Yeah.
checked, you got everything done, and it was all free.
2 states still have them.
And some places, you even got stamps. We got green stamps.
Right. Oh,
and
really?
Yeah,
Green
green
stamps.
Green stamps.
You got
S&H stamps.
S&H
Yeah.
green stamps, yep, you got those at the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
Or there was Gold Bond stamps, I don't remember Gold Bond stamps, but there was S&H green is what we had. And if you bought laundry detergent, it came with glasses or a towel. This was a little bit earlier. My mother would tell me that when she was younger, that they would get laundry detergent and it would have a piece of a dish of some kind in it. You know, or if they'd buy something else, it had a towel in it. That was a big deal, you know.
Jelly jars,
Jelly jar.
drinking,
Yes,
became
yes.
drinking jars.
Yep, absolutely. Remember when they threatened to keep kids back in school if they failed, and they did? When I was in
Ouch.
junior high school, we had a young man who was a couple years older than I, but he was not a great student. So one of the things that I did was I helped the teacher, you know, they would have somebody work with him. for study hall. Then you'd work with Bobby. And I remember working as a teenager at my grandmother's cafe. And Bobby came in to have a hamburger. And he was so excited because he had his first checking account. And he wanted to write a check to pay for his hamburger lunch. And so I helped him write his check. It was probably like for 45 cents or something, whatever it was. But he was so excited that he had his own money, his checking account, and he could pay for his own food with his check. He was so excited for that. He was a really great guy. And I remember as a child, we had a couple of bachelors in town, and whenever the one of them would walk down to the post office, they'd walk by our house and we could see him go to the post office. Well, being ordinary kids like we are, there's a whole group of us in town, we played together. And we'd see Jack go down, which means, why don't we all go down to the post office? And he would all buy us a fudgesicle. But our folks caught on to that game. So, remember when you had emergency brakes instead of parking brakes? Anybody remember cars that had emergency brakes? Anybody remember cars with the push buttons? No? I'm the only one that had a car with a push button. That was a 58 Plymouth, by the way.
I didn't have a car till I came here to the States, so.
Well, I didn't have a car till I had a job.
Yeah.
So that was, but cars and clothing were the way that you could tell the era and how prosperous you were. The bigger, the flashier the cars were, it meant that, you had a little more money. Of course, Henry Ford wanted every car in the world to be black the rest of his life. And he got that for a long, long time. If you were uptown, instead of having a percolator, you got an electric coffee maker. Anybody remember that?
I do. The
White with the
Corningware
blue
ones?
Corningware.
Yeah, yeah.
Forever.
And,
Remember when things lasted forever?
absolutely.
That lasted
And
a
you get
whole
them, you
child
got
in
them
one
fixed.
coffee pot.
You got them fixed.
Because they did, yeah, you
Exactly
could actually
right.
get them fixed and repaired.
I have
Yes.
one of my mother's irons. I still use it. I'll bet that thing is 35 years old. It works better than my brand new.
Is it electric?
Oh, absolutely. It
Oh,
is
yeah.
electric.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. By the time she was into the 60s, I mean, she did a lot of sewing. She did a lot of alterations. And so she had an actual nice little sewing machine and a nice little iron. Of course, that iron had miles and miles on it between us girls. You remember a time period, and I never had this, but a lot of people did. They had monograms. Everything was monogrammed. This was like in the late 50s. Something, was that right? Where things were monogrammed. Oh, well, we're not the monogram group, I guess.
We didn't have that much money.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well,
Nor towels.
We wore each other's clothes.
oh,
Guys, I assume are sisters, right? Yeah.
hand-me-downs were a blessing.
Yes.
Because
They
at
still are.
one point in time when my sister and I were in high school and my mother, we were all a size 5. This was after my mother had 4 children. She was I saw her waist, I don't know how she had that waist, but she had this tiny little waist. And I got my first purchased dress at J.C. Penney.
JC.
It was a turquoise sheath. And so I wore it first. Then my sister begged and begged and begged. Could she wear it on a date? Yes. And then my mother said, think I could wear that? Okay. It cost me $5. And I probably had it for 10 years. Well, as long as I could fit into it, that is. Anyway, it's fun to go down memory lane and to see what you can remember and what it was attached to. We had hay rack rides because we were in the country, and that was a big deal if we were able to go out to the teacher's farm and they'd take us on a hay rack ride around the area. And then we would get to roast hot dogs and have marshmallows. We thought that was really cool. Speaking of school, what kind of a student were you? Did you like school? Did you not like school? Were you a loner? Were you a joiner? You know, that's kind of an interesting topic to think about writing on. Did you participate in sports? Of course, for girls, there wasn't much we could do for sports. We had volleyball and basketball in my little town. Of course, when you weren't in school per se, we would play baseball with boys. And in my little inky-dinky town, we didn't have enough boys to make up a football team, so we didn't know what that was. Did you participate in activities outside of school? We had 4-H. If you were in town, you may have had Girl Scouts. I don't know what else there might have been, but 4-H was a big deal for us because 4-H taught us discipline. We had to do record keeping. We had to be fully participating in what we were raising. If we were raising an animal, or if we were raising a crop, we were sowing, whatever it was. That's how your summer was usually spent, was preparing your 4-H exhibit for the county fair. That was it. That's how you spent your summer. In addition to playing an awful lot, but that was a real big deal for us. And then as you got older, somehow you met a spouse maybe, got married, had children. So how did all of that come about? Yes?
With the original theme being, how did a disappointment turn into a positive or whatever that was?
Yes.
Are you suggesting that we could like tell our whole story with that original theme, or are these two different?
No, this is two different things. That's just a topic.
That's just a
That's just an avenue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're telling multiple stories, but I just want to highlight the fact that some of the worst things in your life may have turned out to be some of the best.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only talking from personal experience, you know,
Like your spouse.
like your spouse. What?
No, I'm kidding.
If the shoe fits, yeah. Some of us have had more than one, so, you know, you have multiple choice. But as you mature, as you go through your young life, and then as you mature, whether you go to college, whether you go straight into a career or whatever you do, explain how that came about. You know, some of us had a career path all marked out for us and then changed our mind at the last second, and that led someplace else, which led someplace else. So how you met your spouse is usually a pretty interesting story. And then what you did as a couple, where you decided to live. How did you get along with your in-laws? That's always a wonderful story. Maybe not.
We omit that one.
Yeah, you can take, these are multiple choice. You can take your pick, which ones you're gonna write about, you know. I remember, I said to try to be nice. As nice as you possibly can, okay? Let's see. Okay.
Would you can I ask another question?
Sure, you can.
I'm trying to envision like how this you know, my life story, to pass it on to like grandchildren, and I'm thinking like as you almost like have to tell, or like I'm envisioning doing this voice recorder,
Yes,
and it's
okay.
just like, I mean, you just tell stories. They don't have
That's
to
right.
all necessarily be one big story,
No,
right?
no, no,
You just
right.
tell these little short stories
Right.
about an era, okay.
Right.
Good, that
Right.
seems much more attainable to me.
And then, okay, I'm sorry if I gave you the impression that you had to sit down and just write everything that I'm telling you
That would
about.
be really boring and hard to do.
It would be,
So
it
just
would be.
little
That's
stories,
why
okay.
what I'm trying to do is suggest avenues for you to start. If one of these storylines appeals to you right away, then start there. And from there, go back and try these other things. But if you're going to do the tape recording for your family, the best thing to do is this is Grandma Jean, and I'm going to start telling you the story of my life. I may jump around and I may tell you this about this and something else, but here it is. So first I want to tell you about,
Okay,
and then go from there.
okay.
And then that particular story will probably lead you to something in it, will lead you on to the next thing that you want to talk about, you know. So it just, you start wherever you want to start. But it's just, your story is a series, your life is a series of stories. What you did today is a story. What you did when you met your husband is a story. What you did, 10 years ago is another story. So you just weave them in there however you want, and you're go back and forth, whatever. If you're going to write it for a particular grandchild or something, or if there's something that maybe they're dealing with right now, and you have a story from your past that you can relate to them, then maybe you will say, hey, dear Jill, I want to tell you something that I think might help you with what you're going through, because this is what I experienced at your age. Something like that, And if you really want to encourage if you have a grandchild who you think is interested in your story, you can ask them to participate with you. Say, I'm gonna sit down and think about my childhood. Why don't you grab a pen and a paper and tell us about how you feel about your childhood so far? Get them encouraged, get them to have started writing their own life story. And if they particularly are having a problem, maybe helping them write out a particular situation will help them work out whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have that, I don't know.
Well, it's something that I'm excited about is my daughter, before my granddaughter was born, she asked that we each, or right after she was born, she asked that both grandmothers write to her, to give her a birthday card, her 7th birthday, her 14th
Oh, how
birthday,
fun.
21st, and 28th, and I'm thinking, I think I want to also, I did that, but now it's like I'd like to
Yes,
do a story like, I remember this when I was 7, I remember
Yes.
this when I was 14.
Yeah.
And then also say, could you include this with it? And it's like, that would be.
that
really
would be fabulous. I think that's a very great idea because, in the next 25, 30 years, she will open this up and she will have a special birthday card from you along with the special story.
Yeah, I love that.
I think
what
that's a
I'm gonna
really
do.
great idea.
Thank you, you kind of encouraged, so I'm all excited.
Well, and you could do that with, I don't know how many grandchildren you have, you could do it for each grandchild, or you can
different
even
year.
do it with your children. If there's something that you want them to know particularly about you, that you may want to just address a letter to them.
Mhm.
But in reality, you're writing a letter for everybody. And you're writing it for the future too. That's why it's important to really get the details in and be specific about where everything you're writing about took place. Dates, times, if you can remember.
Or around.
Around, yes,
Doesn't
yes.
have to be-
If you can relate it to how old you were at the time. You may not know exactly what year had happened, but when you were about 16, something happened and you wanted to write about that. You don't have to be all that specific. If you can't remember, give them the best idea of how old you were when
When
this
that
was happening
yeah.
and what you remember at that time. Okay. All right. Well, it's almost time. let's see. I think I came up with some homework for you guys.
Okay.
Doesn't everybody love homework?
I do nowadays.
But
I
you're not gonna
used to.
grade us, right?
I don't ever grade anything. That's a nice thing about my class. I don't correct your spelling, your grammar, I don't give you a grade.
Good.
Okay. One of the things that I think is important in most families is food. You know, depending on if you have a strong nationality, there's certain foods that are always present at family dinners and things like that. So was there, talking about food, did you have a standard Sunday dinner? For us, it was chicken. We could count on chicken. Or was there a special meal when relatives came and spent the night? Or were picnics a big deal? You know, what kind of thing? If you had a particular food that you loved, like for us, every birthday the kids were asked, what kind of a birthday cake do you want? And it was always mayonnaise cake. Anybody know about mayonnaise cake?
No, never heard of it.
Never heard of it?
Chocolate?
Chocolate. It's a moist chocolate cake, but the mayonnaise takes place of the eggs.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if we didn't have eggs, mayonnaise was cheap.
Yeah.
So that's where we had that. Okay. So try to do something about food. I'm going to give you several suggestions. And you don't have to do all of them, but I'm just going to give you some suggestions. The other suggestion is, we talked about earlier, writing down what your earliest memory was. What age you were, what it was about, where, what, when, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to encourage you to write 10 minutes per day on these subjects. And you will find, as these ladies already have said, that it'll probably stretch out to be much longer than that. The other thing I'd like you to think about is the roles you have played in your life. You have been a daughter, you have been a sister, you've probably been a friend, you've been a mother, maybe you've been a confidant and an encourager, maybe you're now a grandmother. Think about yourself at each of these quote-unquote positions in your life. If you were the sister, were you the big sister, the young sister, the middle sister?
And then a memory about it, or that one's
Yeah.
not tapping into a
That's
story,
not doing
so
anything
just a
for you?
story about any of these, one of these, or all of them, or whatever, huh?
It's your choice.
Okay.
What you're trying to describe to your future generation is who you were as a daughter,
Okay.
who was your sister, who was your brothers,
Okay.
where did you fit into the family dynamic, what did you enjoy about being a sister or not enjoy about being a sister? Were you always the one that had to do the laundry and wash the dishes, or did you skip all that? You know, just it's an idea of another way for you to fully explain to this future person that you're writing for who you are. You want them to know all aspects of grandma or great grandma.
Yeah. We're sisters, so I think we're going to have a lot of evening talks at dinner now.
Oh,
This is good.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
I think
Yeah,
we'll
you
extend our dinner hour quite a bit.
Well, and this is going to be good because being sisters, then you can bounce ideas off of each other, and it'll be interesting to have you each take the same topic and write on it, and then compare notes.
Yeah.
Because
We're gonna find out a lot about each other.
most likely,
We might not be roommates anymore.
well, you're probably gonna have like different perspectives, like I
Sure.
told you earlier.
No right or wrong. just
And the fact that absolutely there is no right or wrong, there's no judgment, there's not gonna be any hurt feelings,
No.
because this is how you perceived her, this is how she perceived you, or the event, or whatever. But you have an advantage in that you have somebody to bounce ideas off of, And when I get together with my brothers, I think I was absent from about 12 to 17 from my life because they tell me all of these things. And I go, where was I? Where was I? They go, well, you're upstairs in the bedroom studying. And I had a friend one time who said, I didn't even know you existed.
Thank you.
Really? Okay. Well, I was determined to go to college, and I knew the only way I could do that was to get a scholarship, and the only way to do that was to get the one and only that was offered to our school.
One.
One. We had a
Wow.
tiny little school. We got one
See how different that
scholarship.
is now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness,
Wow.
I mean, if we got one from Northeastern Junior College, and that was it. And so I had to.
Work your tail off.
When I became that adult, that was my goal, and I put my blinders on and I participated in some things, but I missed out on a lot, but that was my decision. And
And you went to college.
and I didn't. That's a whole nother story. That's a really,
Teaser, we can't wait for next week.
that's a really different story, so yeah, we'll cover that one.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, life takes really strange turns sometimes, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you all for coming, and we'll do this again next Thursday. I'm gonna